This chalice. This is the light of hope for us. It's the flame of freedom and justice, and it's the warmth of hospitality. And this afternoon, it's my great honor to light our chalice in memory of Frank Winsor and in honor of Laurel and their family with gratitude and so much love. From Wendell Berry. Within the circles of our lives, we dance the circles of the years, the circles of the seasons within the circles of the years, the cycles of the moon within the circles of the seasons, and the circles of our reasons within the cycles of the moon. Again, we come and go, changed, changing. Hands join, unjoin. In love and fear, grief and joy, the circles turn, each giving into each and into all. Only music keeps us here, each by all the others held. In the hold of hands and eyes, we turn in pairs, that joining each to each again. And then we turn aside alone, out of the sunlight gone, into the larger circles of return. Welcome, one and all. Friends, we're here together to mark the loss in our lives of Frank Winsor. We're here to do the impossible, to say goodbye, and none of us is ready to do it. Not at all. We're here to hold his dying and his living all together, to look with open eyes into the shadow of loss, to stop our own lives for just a moment and pay attention, for there has passed a glory from the earth. We're here together because we need each other to face the plain sadness and the holy mystery of his dying. We need each other to rest in the presence of his absence, which is everywhere. And we're here to begin what will now be a lifetime of remembering, crying and laughing, and telling the stories and jokes and memories that are the tapestry of his life and our lives. And each one of you holds strands and threads that the others need to make the whole work whole. When a person dies, a beloved, necessary person, there opens every time a question. What do we say to mortality, to the temporary brevity of life, his life, your life, our lives? And what do we say to eternity? What of this man whom we loved is truly gone now? And what of his essential being transcends life and death and even time and memory? When someone whom we love has died, there opens in us a question, what remains now? We're here to hold each other in the asking, to look into each other's faces, into the depths of what you believe in, each of you, the truth and love and hope that ground you, and find your solace there and share it generously, even recklessly. Because it seems to me another question opens whenever death sits down beside us in this brief flash of life, this instant that we're here on earth together, knowing what we know of misery and joy. The question that's ours to own is very simple, and it's with us always. How tender, how careful, how kind, how generous, how brave can we be with each other while our own little lights are still shining? How much like Frank Winsor can we bring ourselves to be? One member of our congregation wrote this month, Frank's eyes shined, sparkling and looking right at you in an encouraging way, like he couldn't wait to hear the next thing you said. His smile beamed, really. People remember the good things for a eulogy, so you might think I'm just saying this, but Frank's face glowed like the sun. We served here on the board together. He never said anything harsh, nor did he oppose harsh things said by others. He smiled. He asked questions. He summed up discussion, all without harshness or worry. Frank was a hearty, happy person with deep roots, strong faith, and pervasive love. Someone else sent this note. Our friendship was forged when he was president of this church, and I was the capital campaign chair to build the new sanctuary, his space. Frank and Laurel were major benefactors to countless organizations, and I wanted to ask him for a pace-setting gift. The best advice I got about Frank came from his former colleague in financial services. He told me to be sure to include Laurel in every conversation. He said, any man who can successfully work 2 full-time careers simultaneously and have a beautiful marriage and a beautiful family has a powerful woman behind him. Pay attention to Laurel, he said. She lays out his clothes every morning. She packs his lunch so he can eat in the car as he drives from the brokerage firm to the Minnesota Orchestra rehearsals. And I did that, and it was right. And from another, Frank remembered the smallest personal details about me. Sometimes he'd remember something I'd shared years before and follow up on how I was doing. He always wanted to catch up on your history. Frank saw the larger picture of what our church could be and supported each person's effort to make us stronger. It was Frank and Laurel's quiet generosity that made our dreams a reality. His friendships were deep and long-standing, important for years and years and decades of years. Mary Hauser, a longtime member here, wrote this, My husband Louis and Frank were in band together for 4 years at Central High School in St. Paul. Frank wrote in Louis' yearbook extolling tales of fun in band and wishing Louis good luck, quote, to a terrific swing man. Much later on, we met Frank and Laurel at Unity Church Unitarian when our kids were young, and much to our delight, we met again here when Frank took charge of the church board in his generous, capable way. He was a person of principle all his life. Brought up in the Methodist Church, his moral compass was ever true. As he grew older, Frank said it seemed less important what we believe than how we really live. Stationed in Atlanta during the Korean War, he and Laurel were appalled by the segregation and the racism they encountered there. And when Laurel found an ad in the paper for a church that said civil rights are for everyone, they headed down to the Unitarian Church and they never left. Frank wrote of those years, "Just as I was beginning a new life as a husband and father and finding myself in the right career, I was drafted into a war I did not believe in. He was convinced that it helped him see the futility of war and that it made him an advocate for peace. He said, I've been a lifelong Democrat, which means I voted for a lot of losers. Today's wars and our government swing to the right frighten me and make me sad, but there's still hope for constructive change. And I would hope the actions I've taken in my life demonstrate my beliefs in ways that words can't express. The things that were important to me when I was young continue to guide me now. Family, friends, music, peace, and justice." I think of Frank and two images come to mind. The first is his quiet companioning of my daughter when she was a little girl. And Frank always asked every Sunday about her piano lessons and then later about her major in music. And he brought her the most beautiful oboe reeds, handcrafted by an orchestra colleague. Because Frank saw her as a musician, she began to see herself like that. And I know he inspired so many young players just like that, so tenderly and humbly and generously. My other image is from the time when Frank was president of the board here, presiding over the Capitol campaign, and he embodied everybody's confidence, which we all lacked, but he embodied this confidence that we could do it, that we should do it, that this could and should be not a casual little church, but a strong and powerful liberal religious presence, a force for good. The people trusted Frank because he's utterly trustworthy and smart and humble. And during one of his years on the board, Frank learned that I often work here by myself on Fridays, often into the night. And someone outside our community that year had been making hostile threats. And I wasn't worried, but Frank was. And he knew he didn't want me to be disturbed when I was here writing. So every Friday, for about a year, he came over quietly with his dog and a lawn chair. And he didn't come in, but he parked that chair by the front door in his floppy hat and his sunglasses all day with a book or a newspaper and his ferocious guard dog, an aged golden retriever with a gray muzzle and considerable arthritis, a terrifying animal. They were the two most unlikely and gallant bodyguards protecting me. And I could see them outside my office window, and all the sermons I wrote that whole year were tear-stained with gratitude and love. He was extraordinary in his ordinary decency. Frank Winsor said, "I believe in the power of music to make this a better world. Music brings people together. It makes dogs howl and stops babies from crying. It expresses emotion and beauty for all."
Welcome to the celebration of life for my sweet dad. Thank you for coming. My dad led a very unique life. When people asked me what he did for a living, I would proudly reply, he plays French horn in the Minnesota Orchestra and he's a stockbroker. Seriously. Excuse me. Seriously, do you know of anyone else who combined two such radically different careers? I'm confident that answer is no. As you can imagine, it's really hard to juggle two full-time jobs. Dad would start his day as a stockbroker, eat lunch in the car on the way to rehearsals, drive back to the office to continue to work on his clients' portfolios, and play concerts in the evenings and on weekends. By all standards, he was very successful at both careers and a highly respected member of the worlds of arts and finance. Thankfully, my brothers and I were lucky to have our loving and super organized mom, Laurel. She managed a very busy home life that was filled with dogs, neighbors, friends, school lunches, volunteer work, and love. She was the glue that held our family together and the cheerleader for my dad that my dad needed and deserved. Of course, my dad was so much more than his work life, so today I would like to share a little bit about his life as a father. First, there was his willingness to listen. I could talk to my dad about anything and everything. He was open-hearted and understanding and gave me the best advice you could possibly imagine. This includes the best way to house train a puppy, the importance of music in life, how to whistle with my fingers, and how to tee up the ball. With Dad, I could talk about love, sex, politics, sports, and raising children. He never preached, and his advice was always thoughtful, compassionate, and sound. Here are a few of my favorite words of wisdom from Dad. Live and learn, or as Dad would say, L&L. For him, material things weren't important. People were. Did something bad happen? L&L. He would then follow up with, are you okay? If yes, then LOL, L&L. Things can always be fixed, replaced, or let go. Simple is best, always best. When everyone was getting electric windows in their cars, Dad stuck with hand cranks. In his words, there was less to go wrong. And one of the most important pieces of advice, even in the darkest of times, music, beauty, humor, and love are everywhere. Always look for the joy in life and let it be a part of who you are. As a girl growing up in the 1960s and 1970s, life had its challenges and barriers. My dad understood that. What stood out for me was how kind and respectful he was to women and girls. His love and respect for my mom was ever present, and he instilled in me a sense of dignity and equality that allowed me to feel comfortable as a female in a male-dominated world. Title IX came too late for me, but Dad opened doors and supported me when others turned me away. When golf courses would not hire girls to caddy, my dad and his friends hired me. No women allowed to play in his favorite golf tournament? After the rule was smashed by our family friend Connie, my dad caddied for me and helped me qualify and compete with the men. In his words, he was a AA caddy. To know my dad was to know his love for the game of golf. For him, lessons learned on the fairways, in the roughs, and on the greens were as valuable as any you learned off the course. My favorite lesson was to never give up. Dad reminded me that after each hole, you get to tee your ball up for another chance to do your best. He was a firm believer in putting your mistakes behind you and moving on. Like everyone in my family, I was devastated when Dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. I didn't know what to say or do. Of course, Dad, being who he was, took it all in stride. "I'm okay," he would always say. "I'm fine. Everyone gets dealt a hand in life. I plan to play my cards the best ways possible." Every single day, Dad found a reason to get out of bed and seize the day. Carpe diem could have been his mantra. Of course, some days were really hard. He experienced pain, dizziness, and his mind and body stopped doing what he asked them to do. Still, he always gave it his best shot, and up to his last breath, he kept fighting. As bad as Parkinson's is, Dad was not going to let it define who he was. That, too, was my dad. As I let a lifetime of memories of my sweet dad wash over me, there's so much I want to say. However, I think this is what he'd want us to know. Work hard, play hard, make your own music, sing your heart out, laugh, dance, love, and when the day is over, rest in peace. I love you, Dad. Thank you for everything. I'll carry you in my heart forever.
For those that may not know me, I'm Steph Winsor, Frank's granddaughter and Jim and Annie's oldest daughter. I felt compelled to speak today because my dad wanted to, but is actually pretty shy about public speaking. But not I. Good, you're gonna laugh at my jokes. This is good. Okay. Though Grandpa Frank played his horn as often as he could, even until he couldn't swallow, he never metaphorically tooted his own horn. He is the most humble and kind man I'll ever know. But today is a better day than any to really boast about him, as I feel extremely lucky to be Frank's granddaughter for a whole number of reasons. Now I realize that my confidence or volume may not have been Frank's, other than a healthy lung capacity. And I'll always remember that Grandpa could enthusiastically talk to anyone about anything. But in a special way, he perhaps found even greater pleasure in listening. Whether hearing the loons cooing on a sunset cruise around Lake Sally, or the way he taught me to hear if my golf ball stayed on the fairway or sliced into the trees. He used listening as a tool and a source of enjoyment. Grandpa Frank's activism in life was always coupled with his gifts of understanding through thoughtful listening. Listening was a powerful way Frank taught us about generosity, because we all know that he gave much more than a simple ear or his time. Speaking of sharing and listening, a story I always love hearing my grandma tell had to do with Grandpa's sense of sharing, or at least my belief in his generosity. My father inherited Frank's work ethic, and my mom has always matched him in that way, which meant that we were lucky to spend lots of my childhood at Grandma's house. And the way I remember it was that Grandpa was still working even when my sister Laurel and I were young, which meant we would enjoy Grandma with all her magic and fun for most of the day. And then we would be there to celebrate the time that Grandpa would come home from work. You see, Grandpa had a knack for knowing how to happy hour. Almost every day, he would enjoy a scotch on ice while enjoying simple, quintessentially Minnesotan snacks, like that funny port wine cheese and those tiny little dill pickles. And no one will ever forget the way that Grandma mixes the onion dip with potato chips. Now, if only I had inherited the Winsor sense of control or a faster metabolism. But anyways, that jovial return home meant that he would walk through the door, met by our welcoming cheers and wagging dog tails to find his special chair. Grandma always tells this story with a smile, because she says one day, instead of running to the door to greet him, I sat in his chair and turned to say, "Grandpa, I'll let you share your chair with me today." And as you can imagine, he obliged. He honestly shared everything with us. As we got older, he would stop by our house just to hear about our day, while walking his dog in our big backyard. We all inherited the love of dog gene from Grandpa. He loved dogs. He was never bothered by the storm of dogs we always seemed to have around. He could remain calm, always. This past Christmas and many years before too, I think we had about 5, 6, heck, maybe it was 7 dogs around. We don't really keep great track. And he always valued the consistency and honor that a dog's love could bring. You see, he was an encourager. He saw the good in everyone and everything. He cheered all of us grandkids on at countless sports games, dance recitals, terrible musical concerts. Oh, maybe that was just me. And even took me to swim team practice. You know, that's when I realized, did you know Grandpa had more matching tracksuits than any other adult I know? I'm sure that many of you remember his years of suits and ties, but I'll always remember his stylish sweats. And he put them to use, too. His love of the Inver Grove Community Center and daily exercise showed me how moving your body can help maintain the vitality of our lives. A lesson I hold in my work as a yoga teacher and researcher today. Grandpa Frank loved movement, swimming, music, good friends, bad cheese, and any kind of golf. He loved weak beer, but strong women, travel, family, and especially Grandma Laurel. Their marriage is a relationship I truly hope to emulate in my lifetime. They both have a genuine zest for life and love of each other that they shared with us. For their 50th wedding anniversary, they took us to Mexico. And as you can imagine, there may have been a small ball that they hit into very little holes. Oh, yes, you're right, there was tons of golf. But I also remember that there was tons of sun, laughter, guacamole, my little sister having to be rescued from the waves by a Hasselhoff look-alike, Paula's incredible fruit lady costume, and the sunburn between my little cornrow braids. And of course, the matching t-shirts. Can you imagine us? I think you probably could. The t-shirts are outside. You can get a look. But most of all, I remember the way that Grandpa Frank knew how to respectfully honor and celebrate the love of his life, Laurel, and the family that love created. With all the gratitude, love, and grace he deserves. Thank you, Grandpa. We love you, Frank. I know you lived and loved with peace. I hope you rest in it, too.
Live and learn, as you say. As Grant would say. When I first sat down to write this, I'll admit it was a huge challenge. As any of you know who knew my grandpa, how can you possibly distill your feelings for something like that into a 2-minute speech? Well, what I quickly realized is that you can't. So instead, I'm going to share 2 important life lessons my grandpa taught me. The first is that life is about chasing what's important and interesting to you, not letting anything get in the way. It's a huge understatement to say that my grandpa led a full life. He did so many different things, had so many fascinating experiences, and he had the interesting stories to prove it. But a defining thread is that he always did what he wanted to do, in the way he wanted to do it, and he wasn't afraid to bend the rules should they get in the way of that. Or sometimes just in the service of a good laugh. Whether it was faking a hand injury to get out of piano lessons, filling a fellow musician's horn with shaving cream for a friendly prank. Grandpa was never afraid of bending the rules, just a little, and everyone around him loved him all the more for it. After college, when I decided to drop everything, move across the country and live on a sailboat, guess what everybody had to say about that? To be fair, with good reason. You know what Grandpa said? It sounds interesting, Evan. You should go for it. Good luck. My grandpa, he taught me, always chase your dreams. Don't let anything get in the way. And I'm forever thankful to him for that. Another important thing that my grandpa taught me is that life is about taking care of those around you that you love. In this room today, Grandpa cheered people here on at swim meets, orchestra concerts, dance recitals, golf tournaments, a few of those, baseball games. Really, whatever you were passionate about, Grandpa was interested in that too. Grandpa helped so many folks here to be better people through his own example. To sum it up, or to try to sum it up, my grandpa had a positive impact on the lives of each and every one of the people here today, because that was just the kind of person he was. Everyone around my grandpa loved him because he genuinely loved them right back. I miss you, Grandpa.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name's Paula, and I'm Bob's wife. Before I get started, I know I'm not supposed to go off script, but I just have to tell a very quick story. Grandpa Frank, to the kids, did not really like his walker. So my son Jeff decided he needed a little bling. So Jeff ordered something for him online. And he was at our house when the package was delivered because he had most of his mail delivered to our house. And he stood there, he opened the package and he stood there. And he looked in and we said, "What'd you get?" He said, "Well, I guess I should have read the dimensions." This is what he got Frank. He thought it would be little for his walker, but this was it. And let me tell you, Frank really did have a good time with this thing. I found out he had a good time at 2 a.m. And the nurses had to say, "Frank, you can't do that now. People are sleeping." "Yes, but it makes you laugh, doesn't it?" He said. So that was Frank. Today I stand before you to remember Frank with that twinkle in his eyes, the sparkle that said, "Watch this." Frank was a numbers guy. I won't go into his poker playing ability, which did, by the way, pay for the diaper service and their first house down payment. And we know his life as a stockbroker was numbers. Laurel even showed us a little pocket-sized book Frank kept filled with numbers of stock happenings. With all the many numbers in his life, oh wait, did I mention golf? The game of numbers. In looking into all these numbers, I've drawn a conclusion that the number 3 must have been a favorite. First, I can say Frank had 3 things in life he loved above all: golf, music, and family. Golf. In his life, he shot 3 holes in 1. His music, the French horn, 3 fingers and a thumb. His family, Laurel and their 3 children. And so it is these 3 loves I will speak of today. We all knew Frank embraced the game of golf with all his heart. He loved the game and hoped all those around him loved it too. I had taken 1 golf class in college before becoming a Winsor. Not so good. So my very first time that Bob and I were going to practice hitting balls, we walked across the street from their home to the practice range. Frank soon joined us with the big old video camera on his shoulders to film my swing. Skipped several years, and Frank asked me to join him and Laurel with their golf instructor. Frank wanted me to love the game of golf. He wanted me to feel the excitement of playing well. The lesson went something like this. I take a few swings, and the instructor says, golf is like dancing. Feel the rhythm in your body. I looked at Frank and said, I'm sunk. I've got no rhythm. I'll mention this again later. Well, I pretty much gave up playing the game, but sure did love watching the rest of the Winsors and friends play. Frank loved green grass, but it had to be on a golf course. He was definitely not fond of the kind that needed mowing at home. Jim told me the story of when he and Linda were young, too young to push the old-fashioned push mower. But they became prime candidates when Frank figured out Linda's too small, Jim's too small. But together, the 2 of them could push that thing. So Linda called it the high-low. Linda went high on the handle, Jim went low on the handle, and off they went. Laurel told me the story of how Frank came home from work one day and asked, would it be okay if I hired the neighbor kid to mow the lawn? I get home from work, and all I want to do is play golf. Laurel said that was 56 years ago, and Frank never mowed another lawn. Of course, Frank and Laurel, Linda, Jim, and Annie have many golf stories and memories. Laurel speaks of all the wonderful golf vacations they had, with Ireland being one of the favorite spots. They also traveled to Ixtapa, Mexico, many times. And as Stephanie mentioned, to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, they invited all 13 of us to join them. It was a blast. Today, I would like to share a memory Jim told me of a more recent golfing outing with his dad and friends. Frank did not give up the game of golf until the weather turned cold, and I'm referring to 2017. Having Parkinson's has challenges, to say the least, but Frank was not going to let that get in the way of him playing. Frank was no longer walking on his own, now using a walker for balance, but on the golf course he ditched that walker. So picture this. Frank shuffles up to the tee. He lines up his shot, swings. It goes straight right. Jim waits. What comment will his dad have on this not-so-great shot? Frank turns to Jim and says, "Trick ball." Another great love of Frank's was music, but it was his perseverance of the French horn that defines Frank's personality. Laurel recalled Frank's trip to Chicago when Frank was a senior in high school. He hitchhiked to Chicago, French horn tucked under his arm. He had arranged to have a lesson with the principal French hornist of the Chicago Symphony, who at the time was one of the top players in the country. So that was a really big deal. As Frank told Laurel, the advice he received was that he would never be a horn player. We're not sure if he suggested a different instrument or just said give it up, but the end message was not at all positive. Fast forward 35 years, and Frank is playing his French horn with the Minnesota Orchestra at Orchestra Hall. This same gentleman was visiting at Orchestra Hall, and Frank spoke to him, reminding him of his advice to give up the horn. Frank never related what the response was. We're just glad Frank has always been a great listener, had enough confidence that he could trust in himself, and didn't always take others' advice. Frank and Laurel's life was music. I remember one of the first things about the Winsor home was music. Upon entering their home, symphony music could be heard, and Laurel humming, always humming as she went about the day. It was simply peaceful. I asked Bob to describe his dad for me, what he could remember about their childhood with him. He said he was always calm, never really got mad at stuff. Bob remembers. Bob remembers up at Detroit Lakes the annual family summer vacation where Frank played in the Pine to Palm golf tournament for over 50 years. Bob said that if his dad came back to the cabin after a golfing match and went swimming for a really, really long time, then we knew he didn't do well. They had a family rule. They could only watch one TV show a day. Bob would rather watch TV and eat chips all day, but his choice of one show usually was Batman. But at night, they watched a lot of Mission Impossible before bed because Frank liked Mission Impossible. When I first met Bob, it became pretty clear to me that Laurel took care of the household fixes. They joked Frank didn't know which end of the screwdriver to use. Laurel told me the story of their first house and its low dining room chandelier. Frank mentioned he didn't know who to call, a plumber or an electrician. Well, Laurel had a plumber doing some other work in the house, so she told the repairman Frank's comment, and the repairman said, well, I wouldn't be much of a French horn player. And finally today, I'd like to leave you with a few memories I have of Frank in his last year here with us. First is this past Christmas Eve. To give a bit of a background leading up to Christmas, we all knew this may be the last Christmas we would share with Frank, and we wanted to make it extra special. We attended a service here, probably around Thanksgiving. It was a wonderful service, and I remember Frank saying so wonderfully clear and joyous. Also, the Christmas service schedule was announced, and Frank thought it would be nice to attend the 4 o'clock service and then go to Jim and Annie's to celebrate Christmas Eve after that. As Christmas drew near, Laurel wisely said they wouldn't be able to do both church and celebrate with the family. Frank would just get too worn out, so they would not be going to church, but of course hoping to celebrate at Jim and Annie's with everyone. Since Frank wasn't going to be able to hear the choir here, Andy and Catherine, a lovely young husband and wife music team, were able to come to us at Jim and Annie's. Bob joined in on drums and Jim on his guitar. And now I will demonstrate just how this went down. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Frank's sitting in a nice, big, puffy chair, and I lean over because I asked him if he wanted to dance, and he said, sure. So I lean over to the chair to try to hit Frank. And I start lifting him up, and the rest of the family is looking at me. Like, what are you doing? Steph says, what are you doing? I said he wants to dance. So we get up. He doesn't have his walker. We're there. The music's playing. And he starts saying, okay. And he's snapping his fingers. Frank, help me out on my rhythm now. And he's snapping his fingers. And he's doing this a little bit. And he's singing. And then he says, okay, how low can we go? And he's going. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm either going to fall over him or he's going to fall on me if I can. And the family's laughing. And he's having a great time. So we get back up. And he's very strong. So we get back up. He says, okay, here we go. We're going to move. And he's moving without the walker like this across the floor. Okay, slow it down. And that was the best part of the whole evening. And finally, Frank's final evening before bidding us all farewell. We had decided to make a celebration, really. Perhaps there was a little scotch, maybe beer or wine, good food and music. The music choice was folk songs, of which the Winsor family were accustomed to singing growing up. Frank was resting quietly, his heart still strong. Annie, Jim, Bob, and I were with him, and we decided maybe a warm washcloth would feel good to him. So Annie and I proceeded to wipe his face. Annie decided there was a little something on the inside of his eye that was really bugging her. She says, "Give me that watch, Frank. I got to try to get that out." So at that point, Frank opened his eyes. He hadn't opened his eyes for a few days. So Annie leans down to Frank and says, "Frank, I want to ask you a favor before you leave. Can you pass along some of your putting skills?" Frank's lips formed into a slight smile. And I want you to remember Frank in this next part. If you look at your program, he has that little eyebrow there. So I then chimed in, "Well, if you're granting wishes, Frank, can you please give me some of your rhythm?" At this point, Frank not only had that twinkle in his eyes, he raised his eyebrow as if to say, "Now you're asking for a miracle." A few minutes later, Annie said his heart was performing like those she had heard many times before at their animal practice. It flutters, sounding like it is applauding. And then he left us. Bob glanced at the atomic clock on the wall that read 9:19. He was off to the 19th hole, the bar at the clubhouse. How fitting that the music started playing. Here Comes the Sun.
Friends, I hope you'll stay after the service and continue sharing stories and memories with Frank's family just right across the hall. Please do stay. And I invite you to join in a spirit of meditation. Spirit of life and love, moving through wind and over waters in sunlight and snowfall and starlight, on wild grasses and in the voices of birds and the voices of children. Great Spirit moving in all things and each of us. Gracious God. May there be peace. For Laurel especially, and for Linda, Jim, and Bob and their families, and for his many friends. May the days ahead be gentle, softened in time by sweet memories and by music that never ever fades. May Frank be at peace. May he be at one with life eternal. May the beauty of his life shine, and may our lives bring honor to his memory. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember him. In the blueness of the summer sky and the gladness of summer rain, we will remember him. In the rustling of leaves and the gorgeous autumn, we will remember him. In the blowing of wind and the chill of winter, we will remember him. And in the opening of buds and return of singing birds in spring, we will remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he's part of us, and we will remember. Spirit of life, moving through all things, we commend to your embrace, we entrust to you our brother Frank. Amen and amen. These words in benediction are ones that Frank spoke every Sunday, both here and at Unity Church Unitarian in St. Paul, the words of his minister, Arthur Foote. May peace dwell within our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our will and love of truth forever guide us. Amen and amen.
How was somebody stood up?